As you know on this channel, I'm very critical of the Federal Reserve and the mainstream financial press. And I often wonder, am I being too hard on these guys? Am I too critical of the academics and the elitists at the Federal Reserve? Maybe I throw too much shade in the cheerleaders in the mainstream financial press. Of course, then I hear what they say, and they instantly remove all doubt from my mind. Let's take the case of these two here. All the way over there, that's Claudia Sahm. She's a former economist at the Federal Reserve. And this guy right next to me is Joe Wiesenthal. He's the editor at Bloomberg and the co-host of the Odd Lots podcast. Well, these two recently did a podcast together. Now, I actually agree with almost everything they said on that podcast. The problem is, I've been saying the exact same thing for over a year now, but they can't hear me. What's up, guys? I'm nobody special, and a few days ago, this was posted in Bloomberg. Economists may be using bad data to make big decisions. COVID-19 and general mistrust among members of the public could be skewing U.S. government employment surveys. And there's a lot of familiar themes in this podcast, a lot of things that I've been saying over and over again on this channel for well over a year. Let's listen to what Claudia Sahm, a former economist at the Federal Reserve, had to say.
Now, there was a lot of conversation amongst those of us who have nothing better to do than study data, that what a job opening is could be changing over time.
Because of the pandemic, the way employers list jobs is just different than it was before.
Especially from work from home, you can put up multiple ones for different geographies because it doesn't matter.
So a company might list the same job in several different cities.
Now, if what Claudia Sahm just said sounds a little familiar to you, it's probably because you've been watching this channel and you know that I have been saying that ever since December of 2022, when I had the Happy Hawaiian on my channel in an interview series called Garbage In, Garbage Out. Here's a little clip from part 3 of that interview. Let me know if any of this sounds familiar with what Claudia Sahm had to say. Openings are inflated due to remote job postings show up in multiple cities.
What we actually have, and as the St. Louis Fed research shows, is that there is a fundamental shift in how we should interpret this job openings data since the pandemic and since work from home started. So as they go in and survey all these separate cities, what is the labor market like in each city? They're looking at the number of job openings. But what we have is companies posting the same job in 10 different cities.
So congratulations to Claudia Sahm for being only 13 months late to a story that a couple of Twitter randos had in December of 2022. But it wasn't just Claudia in this podcast. We also had Joe Wiesenthal, one of the editors at Bloomberg and the co-host of the Odd Lots podcast, which is one of the biggest financial podcasts in the world. He was chiming in on this story as well.
Pre-COVID, JOLTS was a bottom shelf economic indicator. It was the well drinks of, it's like some nerds like to pour over it because there is information on it, but it was not a market mover.
If JOLTS was a bottom shelf well drink to them pre-COVID, it was basically a cheap shot of bad tequila once the pandemic hit.
You just don't know that the patterns of history related to things like job openings, related to things like claims and quits, really mean the same thing in this environment as they might have in past cycles.
So I would be remiss if I didn't also congratulate Joe Wiesenthal on being 13 months late to a story that the Happy Hawaiian and I had back in December of 2022. That's something Joe Wiesenthal would have seen if, of course, he hadn't blocked me on X. See, it turns out Joe Wiesenthal didn't take too kindly to my criticism of this article that he wrote back in December of 2021, advocating for the extremely serious case for minting a $1 trillion coin in order to solve the problem of debt ceilings and government spending at a time when inflation was over 7%. Well, I let my objection to that story be known on Twitter that it was fundamentally insane to mint trillion-dollar coins while inflation was already crushing people's lives. And Joe's response was, but it wasn't just the inaccuracy of the JOLTS report that they were talking about on that podcast. They were also talking about the current trend of people not responding to government surveys due to mistrust in the government.
We've seen a growing distrust in government. And, I can understand if you don't trust the government, if they show up and be like, hey, tell us all about your wealth and your debt and how much income you make, which for a lot of people, these are very sensitive topics.
Pew Research found that 2/3 of adults think the risk of responding to a survey outweighs the benefits. They're concerned about things like privacy and not so concerned about the consequences of low response rate data. Sahm says they should be.
But you need to rebuild that relationship and help people understand, know what you tell us. Like policymakers, this is important. And if we don't know what's going on in your life, then it's almost guaranteed that the policy just can't address the issues.
So in a fine bit of gaslighting there, Claudia Sahm has a lot to say about those conspiracy nuts who don't trust the government, in particular the Federal Reserve. That is, of course, after the Federal Reserve told us inflation would be transitory when they knew it wouldn't, and looted our savings and devalued everything we've worked for, and now they wonder why we don't trust them. But I agree with Claudia Sahm that this data is very important, and I think this is a great time for us to patch up our relationship, her words, not mine. And, well, since she wants to know what's going on in my life, well, let's call her up and see what she's got to say here. Yeah, hi, Claudia. Jack Gamble from Nobody Special here. How you doing? Oh, that's right, I forgot. Claudia blocked me as well. Turns out Claudia didn't like my feedback when I responded to this post on X where she said that's impossible, referring to a bad economy, saying the vast majority of Americans are better off financially, full stop. Well, Claudia didn't like that I pointed out that the vast majority of Americans don't have $500 to their name. Savings has been virtually wiped out by inflation. We've got more homeless in America than at any point in history. And no, the vast majority of Americans are not better off financially. If you stepped out of the ivory towers at the Federal Reserve, you would know that. And, well, Claudia, who claims that she wants better data and claims that she wants people to respond to more surveys, isn't really interested in data that doesn't suit her narrative. So long story short, I actually agree with most of what these two have to say. I actually said the same exact thing over a year ago, something that neither one of them could hear because both of them blocked me for disagreeing with posts on X about minting trillion-dollar platinum coins to solve government spending problems and posts claiming that the average American is better off financially when we all know that is clearly not the case. Now, don't get me wrong, Claudia Sahm and Joe Wiesenthal are not my target audience. I couldn't care less that they blocked me. How could they do that to me? The point is, echo chambers do their occupants a disservice, and these two spend their days in echo chambers. They surround themselves with sycophants who say things like, the average American is better off financially, and yeah, Joe, amid record high inflation, minting trillion-dollar coins would be a fantastic idea. Of course, if I were to do that, I'd be surrounded with people who say, Jack, no, your hairline's not receding, and I think you're an excellent dancer. Now, I may not have the financial pedigree that these two have. I've never been an economist at the Federal Reserve. I don't have any degrees in finance. I'm certainly not the editor of the largest financial journalism organization in the world. But you know what I did have? This story. 13 months before they did. Till next time, live small and dream big.